This is an extract from the Leader Coronavirus Daily podcast by the Evening Standard and hosted by me, David Marsland. To hear the whole thing, search for it on your podcast provider. At Bournemouth Beach, they partied in the 30-degree heat like social distancing didn't exist, be it 2 metres or 1, with mitigation. It's like the Mediterranean sent the weather to remind us of what we're missing out on, at least for now. It's reported the government's been busy signing up deals with countries like Spain and Italy that'll let British people travel there without having to go through quarantine, perhaps as soon as July 4th. It could be a lifeline for an industry that feared it could lose up to £20 billion, but travel journalist Simon Calder is not convinced. He joins me now. Simon, at this stage, the so-called air bridges are just a rumour. What do we actually know about what's happening?
We know that this is an extraordinary episode in government by leak. It's now, I think, 8 weeks since Dominic Cummings came back from his trip to Durham and saw that the government was in some disarray and unpopularity over the number of care home deaths, and decided that it was time for an eye-catching policy. And he decided that quarantine would be the right way to go, even though, of course, at that stage, the rate in the UK, thank goodness, was declining, and all the international medical advice is that there's no point in putting quarantine in on a blanket basis when you're in decline, and so are lots of the other countries around the world, and certainly around Europe. Since then, we've just had leak after leak after leak, and some of them almost comedic, so that we got the Prime Minister's announcement on the 10th of May, and then immediately we got a kind of leak, only it was actually an official government announcement saying, well, of course, this doesn't apply to France, and then that was quietly withdrawn. And here we have on Thursday morning, and I make it 6 days to July, millions of holidaymakers and hundreds of thousands of travel industry workers simply do not know if foreign holidays will take place this summer. It is an extraordinary state of affairs, and all I know is what I'm hearing from various rumours in the industry, some of them well informed, some of them pure guesswork, but that is that on Monday the Department for Transport will announce a list of perhaps 8 or 10 destinations that you and I can travel to, probably starting on the 4th of July, and probably the Foreign Office will change its advice against all but essential travel. But we only know that from all the leaks. We have been given very, very little guidance.
So the countries that are on this list include places like France, Spain, Italy, Greece, all popular tourist destinations. But do you think anyone will actually go, Simon? Do you think that the fears over coronavirus have abated so much that people will willingly get on an aeroplane and head off to a tourist hotspot?
You'd be far, far safer on a Greek island in the Azores of Portugal, which has a nil rate at the moment, far safer than you would in London. And while the government insists that their policy is informed by the science, the scientists I've spoken to say this is the most balmy thing we've ever heard of. The best way to get the rate down in the UK, or get the prevalence down in the UK, is for millions of people to go on holiday to less dangerous places. And so the government's move has actually had the counterproductive effect of, sadly, it will increase the number of cases and sadly deaths in the UK. But since it's a political stunt rather than serious policy, that's just, I was going to say unforeseen consequences. It was pretty foreseeable for anybody who thought it through. There will certainly be an appetite. It will be much diminished for people going abroad. I think probably the majority of people are thinking, no, let's just leave it till 2021. But there's still a very substantial minority who would love to go abroad and are simply profoundly frustrated at the way that the government has had, 8 weeks since it decided to bring this in, or Dominic Cummings decided to bring it in. And we are still apparently going to see a weekend of frantic phone calls between different governments. You genuinely couldn't make it up. It is, I've been covering travel for 1,000 years, and I have never, ever seen government causing so much grievous damage to the industry. Most of the time, travel just gets on with it. It delivers great holidays, fantastic value, makes lots of money, creates loads of jobs, and the government lets it be. But at the moment, the government is, if it had set out to do as much damage as possible to the UK travel industry, it's difficult to see how they could have done any more than they are doing now. It's first of all shameful, but secondly just tragic for the people in the travel industry, desperately trying to sort of rebuild and save jobs, and sadly for the people who will die. The county councillor in Cornwall, responsible for tourism, tells me that he's really worried that it will cause harm because people will stay at home, they'll go to Cornwall, they'll take in infection. Of all the boggling government decisions during this crisis, this is probably the most damaging.
What's the travel industry in the rest of the world making of all this?
It depends who you are. There is celebration in Paris, in Amsterdam, in Frankfurt, in Dubai, at the way that the UK government is smothering its travel industry. Just at the time when everything's opening up, when people should be starting to travel, the UK's gone the opposite way. And of course, there's absolute horror in countries such as Croatia, such as Turkey, which have not been named on any of the leaked lists that I've seen so far, who are thinking, hang on, well, what's wrong with us? Why can't we have an air bridge or a travel corridor as well? And that's because these things are pure fiction. Many governments abroad will just say, look, you just tell us where to sign. We'll sign anything, frankly, even though you've got a much worse rate than we have. That's because we desperately need to save our economies. So the world is looking on with a combination of amusement, appreciation from rival airlines, and sheer horror at a nation which already they say is causing itself immense self-harm through the Brexit process, now deciding it's going to cause even more damage to itself and to the host destinations as well.
Search for the Leader Coronavirus Daily on any podcast provider to hear more from the podcast.